Okay, now we're in book 3, and the second sort of pre-lesson about tuning is tuning with harmonics. In the last lesson, we talked about tuning with common major chords that we play and checking like octaves and making sure the purity of those octaves. And with harmonics, it's kind of a convenient method of tuning, though it's not always totally accurate because it depends on how accurately your guitar is set up. If you have a really cheap guitar and it's not, it doesn't have very good intonation anyway, naturally, then the harmonics may not be reliable. But generally, they're pretty good, so they're pretty close. And if you don't know what harmonics are, we can talk about that first. Like, you have the length of the string from the nut to the bridge, or here, the bridge, and then the first harmonic would be the halfway point between the nut and that would be your 12th fret. And so you touch right above the fret. I didn't do very well there. And you can even hit chords. There's the Hendrix lick. And then that was the beginning of one of his songs, and it was on the Axis Bold as Love album. But he was hitting harmonics like that. And harmonics are kind of fun, because they're very bell-like. And notice I'm hitting them, and my left hand is like playing with no hands. They keep ringing, and you can get, that's the halfway point, and then the third of the way point is the 7th fret, and then the 5th fret is a quarter of the distance of the string length. And the way this method works, I'm just going to go through it right now. You hit the 5th fret harmonic on the 6th string and check it with the 7th fret of the 5th string. 5th fret of the 6th string, 7th fret of the 5th string. And you can hit them separately, and sometimes, you want to make sure on your electric guitar that your pickup is set to where your bridge pickup is on. Because if I set it with just the neck pickup, you can still get the harmonics, but they don't come out as easily like if I hit all 6 strings. Now, if I put in the bridge pickup, this switch is broken, and the guitar came, a new guitar with a broken pickup switch, and I've never fixed it, but anyway. But now hear how easily those come out with the bridge pickup on. So, and also plucking near the bridge helps to bring out the harmonics rather than plucking near the neck. So if you pluck closer to the bridge and have the bridge pickup on, your harmonics will ring better. Okay? So we're checking the 5th fret of the 6th and the 7th fret of the 5th string. And then we go across the street and check the 5th fret of the 5th string with the 7th fret of the 4th string. And you hear them, if they're in tune, they'll sound the same, and you won't hear any interference. Interference is what we call beats. Like I'll check the 4th string now, 5th fret, and then the 3rd string, 7th fret. Now, if I purposely detune the 3rd string, let me hit them again. You hear that interference, that pulse? Those are called beats, and what that is the difference frequency between the two notes being just slightly out of tune with each other. Sorry. So I determine which one's flat, and it's the third string. And then while they're both ringing, I can tune them up to where the beats kind of crisscross and you don't hear any interference. Listen. Let me get it even more out of tune. Like, hear how fast those, see, the more out of tune they are, the faster those beats are. And as I tune them, then they level out, and you can still hear a very slow beat, so it's not quite in tune. That's pretty good. So those are beats, and that's kind of a cool way to tune, because you can hear the beats very clearly with the purity of the harmonics. See? And then I'll check the other ones again. So for the sixth string, fifth, fourth, and third strings, you can do 5th fret to 7th. But when you get to the third string, 5th fret, and you hit the 7th fret of the second string, it's a half step off, because the tuning between those strings, the second and third strings, is different. So it doesn't work there. So to tune the second string, I'll play the harmonic at the 7th fret of the 6th string, and it's the same note as the open second string. And then I'll hit the 7th fret harmonic of the 5th string and check it with the 1st string. You could also check the 2nd string with the 1st string, but those are really high notes. I mean, you can tune it that way too, the 1st string, but you can check the 6th string 7th fret with the open 2nd string, or the 7th fret of the 5th string with the open 1st string. So to tune 2 of the strings, we're involving normal notes, not all harmonics. So again, we've got 5th fret to 7th fret of the 6th string to the 5th string, 5th fret to 7th fret of the 5th string to the 4th string, 5th fret to 7th fret of the 4th to the 3rd string, and it doesn't work to the 2nd string, so you have to go to the 7th fret harmonic on the 6th string, and it'll ring with the 2nd string open, and you can check that. And then the 7th fret of the 5th string harmonic, check that with the 1st string open. So it is kind of a cool way to check, but I wouldn't totally, unless you had a repairman really set up your guitar to where it's got really good intonation, the harmonics can be a little bit off. And if you have like a really cheap guitar that doesn't tune very well anyway, then the harmonics are just not reliable. So, but generally they're close enough to where, you know, you can still tune with harmonics, and everything sounds pretty much in tune. So hopefully you enjoyed this video. I hope you learned something about harmonics and tuning. And you know, tuning is kind of a complicated thing, and you know, a piano tuner, a very wise piano tuner, a long time ago when I was 16 years old, I was in a music camp. I had won a scholarship, and I was the only guitarist. You know, talk about feeling out of place. But I got lessons with the piano tuner, who was a jazz guitarist. And he told me, he said, you know, he said, son, you've got a really good ear, and that can work against you when you're trying to tune your guitar, because you'll want it to be perfectly in tune, and you'll never get a guitar perfectly in tune. And that's something to be aware of, and you know, so you don't want to stress out too much. And you might have a really good ear, and then you can hear that something's a little sour, and you try to fix it, and it becomes very frustrating. We call that a tuning fit, so you want to avoid that kind of thing. And just use these methods that I'm showing you, and they're different cross checkings of how to tune. Like you can tune, in the first lesson, I talked about roots and fifth chords, and just checking those across the strings on G, D, just root, fifth, root, and then root, fifth octave on the A and the E. And that's a good way to, kind of, because you want to make sure that you temper your guitar, and as you get better at tuning, you'll know how to do that. One chord might be perfectly in tune, and then another one noticeably sour, and so you have to get them both a little bit out of tune, but tolerable, to balance out. That's what we call tempering your guitar. And I've had a lot of experience with that with cheap guitars, because I've taught guitar through the years since the 70s. And back in the 60s, they used to sell these department store guitars, and even in the 70s. And you could go to Sears and buy a cheap guitar, and go to Montgomery Ward and buy a cheap guitar. And so I would get students, even 30 years later. This was in my grandmother's closet, and it has, I think my grandfather played this guitar, and I'd see it and I go, oh, okay, it's one of those. I mean, the thing about, they were cheap guitars, but they were built like trucks, and they still existed 30, 40 years later. But you would play one chord and get that in tune, and then say an E chord would be really sour, So you'd have to fudge between the two chords to get them both tolerable. And that's what we call tempering the guitar. And on a cheap guitar, if I ever find a cheap guitar that's really not very tunable, I'll do a lesson on that and show how you can temper, between them. And you kind of have to do it by ear if it's really bad, if it's really an untunable guitar. But most guitars nowadays, even the cheap ones, are built to where they're much more accurately in tune. Now the parts, like the tuners and things like that, might break off because they're not very durable, and they're made with cheap metal alloys that if you knock it on something, it could just break off. But so they're not as durable as those Sears guitars, but they're more accurate and they tune better. So that's I guess a good thing. It's just like everything. TV sets these days, if it goes on the blink, you don't call a TV repairman anymore. You just buy another TV. So you could just buy another cheap guitar. So I hope you enjoyed this, and please subscribe. Kind of helps my algorithms. I really need some algo. And also go to my Facebook page, John Hedger Guitar Studio, and like my page. Thank you so much.